Hello, I'm Scott Hershey, master violin maker and the maker of the pocket ship known as Perfecto. This is a modified version of the Chesapeake Lightcraft pocket ship designed by John Harris. I modified the original plans by 1 foot, allowing for a larger cabin area. To begin the project, I created a scaled-down model out of balsa wood, just to see how things might look when the craft is completed. Once I was satisfied with the design, I decided to do all the pesky little projects ahead of time, so when the hull is finally completed, I'll be ready to rig the boat and go sailing. The first project I began to create was a gull wing sliding hatch for Perfecto. I wanted to give the boat an old world look. This was quite a complex building project requiring many parts and many coats of varnish, as you can see here. The next item I decided to create was a group of dead eyes. Dead eyes are used on the shrouds of the mast to shorten the shrouds, and many old vessels had these on them, and I thought, well, this would be a good item to put on the boat as well. Here's a picture of what the item might look like when it's done. Next on my list was to create the mast for Perfecto. This is a 4-sided box mast made of Douglas fir, very narrow grain Douglas fir, and you have to use a lot of clamps to glue up this mast and make sure that it stays straight in order for it to look proper when it's set into the boat. The next item up was to create a bowsprit, and this was a multiple glued up Douglas fir piece of wood, and it needed to go onto my Schnitzbank, which is a shaving bench, to shape it so that I could put on the binnacle on the front of the boat. It turned out rather well. Once the bowsprit was completed, then I moved on to do the boom and the gaff boom, and then painted everything ahead of time. I wanted to create a maiden's head for the underneath the bowsprit and decided to do a scroll. I'm in the violin business, so why not? After I created the drawings for the actual scroll, then I began to carve it out of mahogany and made it match to the bow of the boat, and finally I varnished it. Looks pretty cool, I think. Moving on, I decided to do the boom gallows next. This was 2 pieces of mahogany glued together and then very carefully drilled out with a 1-inch hole, and then the boom gallows were varnished and covered in leather where the mast would rest. Next up is to make the tabernacle. The tabernacle is a short U-shaped channel that holds the base of the mast. The purpose of the tabernacle is to allow you to fold the mast down easily for transport. Making the tiller arm and rudder come next. I decided to use multiple layers of mahogany and cypress glued up into a little jig that I created on the workbench. For the rudder, I just simply followed the plans in CLC's workbook and made the rudder according to spec. For the cheeks of the rudder, where the tiller goes through, I decided to use mahogany. I thought that would give a nice old-fashioned look to everything. Creating the decorative port light rings are next. These decorative trims will go around the acrylic port lights and will be permanent. So now it's time to begin the actual construction of the boat. beginning with the building of the centerboard trunk. The centerboard trunk also has a keel attached to it. When the centerboard trunk is completed with the keel, you will then add lead to the keel as specified on the plans and be mounting the finished product into your cradle. This is the final centerboard and keel assembly dropped into the cradle for the boat. Since I was building from plans and not from the kit, I had to cut out all of the hull panels for the boat. This resulted in making many scarves so that the long panels could be glued up together. Once the panels of the hull were glued together, it was time then to start laying out where the floor timbers and bulkheads would go within the boat. I then marked those areas with blue tape so that I knew where they would go when I started to do the fiberglassing. The hull panels are now ready to be put together and stitched in place. It's time now to cut out all the floor timbers for your boat. I did this over a period of a few days and it went rather well. The floor timbers are now ready to install inside your boat. I stitched them in place and then later epoxied them in place. Here they are, ready for the epoxy fillets. The bow of the boat still needs to have a layer of glass placed over the wood. The one thing about building a pocket ship is that you will have to dedicate many hours of sanding to the final product to make it look good. Building the bow of the boat is very important. Spend a lot of time in this area to make sure that it is built strong. This is a shot of the forward bulkhead storage area and the forward bulkhead flotation. Here's a photo of the bow eye I installed. This is the companionway bulkhead installed for a rough fit. The boat is now taking shape and the bulkhead on the inside will give you some sense of how the boat will look when finished. I now had to make a cutout pattern for the cabin top due to changing the size of the plans. The grandkids had a great time visiting while building the pocket ship, and they had a great time exploring the inside of the boat during their visit. This is Rowan hiding inside one of the storage compartment areas inside Perfecto. Well, things are starting to take shape. It's looking a little bit more like a boat every day. And now I'm going to start working on the interior part of the boat. I'm going to begin by cutting and fitting the new oak flooring for Perfecto. This required a lot of cutting and fitting to make it look good. Once I was satisfied with the overall look, then I stained the flooring. Cockpit construction came next. Once I had all the bulkheads in place, I decided to paint the interior, making it easier for construction. I taped out all the areas that would need epoxy in the future. And I also painted the back side of the seating for the cockpit area, an area that's very difficult to paint once the project is done. We now move forward to the interior design of the boat. It is here where I wanted to add mahogany trim, shelving, a wine rack, and some grab rails. And this area makes a handy little seat while at anchor or underway. For something a little different for a boat this size, I decided to add a wine rack. This was probably a little overkill, but it was a lot of fun to make. And here you can see the results using a variety of woods, mostly mahogany. Louvered doors were not called for in the plans, but I feel they complement the interior very well. Louvered doors are very complicated to build, But once they're done, they look beautiful inside and outside of the boat. It's time now to start working in the cockpit area. I begin by constructing the seatback area in the cockpit. Once the left and right side, or port and starboard, are finished, these areas will get sheeted over with 1/4-inch plywood and later be filled with expandable foam. Here are a few more views of the cockpit area. Well, thank you very much for stopping in and looking at my progress for Perfecto. This is the end of segment number 1, and I'll be posting more videos in the future. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.